2012 wasn't a great year for THQ. They were feeling the aftermath of several poor business decisions, starting with the U-Draw's release in late 2010. It saw modest sales figures on the Wii, but that didn't stop them from bringing the U-Draw to PS3 and Xbox 360 as well the following year. This caused a $100 million revenue shortfall, and throughout the year they would face even more losses and a massive crash in their stock. They shuttered various game studios, sold licenses, and laid off several employees in order to keep funding their AAA titles that would hopefully keep them afloat in the long run. One of those games was Darksiders II. The fact that the game was able to complete development and release without delay is incredible. While games like Metro Last Light and South Park The Stick of Truth would be delayed and eventually auctioned off to different publishers, Darksiders II didn't have a shaky development cycle at all, and was released in August 2012, with a Wii U port 3 months later as a launch game for the system. Now, Darksiders II saw similar success to its predecessor, but the truth is, it takes a marginally different approach to its formula, opting to deviate from most of the cornerstones the original game borrowed from 3D Zelda. So what does this mean, and how do I feel about it? Well, let's find out. I'm Liam Triforce, and this is Darksiders II. As opposed to the original game, Darksiders 2 has a very empty, ominous title screen. There's no showcasing of Joe Mad's illustrations, there's no impactful orchestra, rather there's a jarring, foreboding track filled with nasty drones and low-toned instruments. Well, this game focuses on another horseman, Death. Perhaps the most well-known of the four, and I'm excited to see how they characterize him. I've seen far too many depictions of the Grim Reaper in fiction, but a game series that focuses on the Horsemen of the Apocalypse? Surely Vigil can pull something off. The game opens up with a description of the war-driven Nephilim, a result of the fusion of angels and demons. The Horsemen are the last of the Nephilim, as they slaughtered the rest of their brethren in exchange for power. They ended the war, but Death trapped the souls of the Nephilim in an amulet and kept it a secret to the Charred Council. I'm not quite sure why he preserved their souls, but it's clear to me that this was just set up for the first level and for the rest of the game. You'll see why. For now, let's turn our attention to an amazing tutorial level that is a significant step up from the first game. Remember how I said Darksiders dragged its tutorials out for far too long, and that I wanted Vigil to keep things organic instead? Darksiders 2 makes sure to rectify this. It is nothing but an organic introduction to everything the game has to offer. You learn about combat, the weapon system, climbing, and even boss fights with an ice golem and a hype as fuck encounter with war, all in the span of approximately 25 minutes. Everything else afterwards is just a matter of you playing the game and figuring it out for yourself. This is a far cry from the original Shadow Lurker sections, and its first chunk of gameplay not being true to the rest of the game. The combat is shallow at first, the world structure seems far too linear, etc. The game got better, of course, but its core design philosophies weren't exactly evident until I got to the Twilight Cathedral. And even then, there were still Shadow Lurker sections before the second dungeon too. It's absurd. Darksiders 2 just plops you in. You figure out how your horse controls, and you head towards the mountain's peak. The tutorial also reintroduces climbing, which is about as useful as it was in the original game. You now have the ability to wall run and hop from one wall to another, as well as the ability to wall jump. It's a step up from the first game and gives the player more freedom to figure out climbing challenges, and come to think of it, it shares even more in common with the Sands of Time than Darksiders 1 did. We'll talk more about how the climbing mechanics are used in dungeons later on, because they're a lot cooler there. Soon, you'll encounter enemies. While at first combat may not seem like anything to write home about, just like the original game, you can purchase more combos as you progress. It has about the same amount of depth at face value that the original game has from the first dungeon onward. This is true even with Death's Reaper form, mirroring the mayhem-causing but tactically usable Chaos form from the first game. The big difference is how the scythes feel. Combos are now fast and snappy, and combined with the secondary weapons you can pick up, you can create some fun strings. Yeah, that's right. Picking up weapons. The loot system is one of the many things that makes the combat system stand out compared to the first game. As soon as you kill a couple of enemies, you'll end up grabbing some loot. The loot system is an RNG-based attempt at adding an immense level of diversity to the combat system in place. It is quite divisive amongst fans of the series, and I'm here to give you my take. I find this system to be fucking incredible. In my opinion, it is by far one of the best ways I've seen RNG be handled in a video game. Essentially, you can grab an assortment of items from chests and dead enemies. Stuff like new scythes, secondary weapons such as gauntlets, hammers, axes, and glaives, and armor pieces and talismans. Each item has a base stat, but some items can contain a wide array of additional stats and elements, such as fire, ice, and lightning elemental damage, critical damage buffs, and thorns that can cause some damage when enemies hit you. It's your job to figure out what works best in which situations. This is an amazing way to constantly encourage the player to seek out treasure chests in the world. Yes, the items you're discovering aren't finite upgrades to your arsenal, and there's no way of knowing what you might receive, but because you constantly need to resort your inventory and switch up your tactics, you need anything you can possibly find. But this isn't enough. Eventually, you might not need a lot of different items. Your inventory will be brimming with a ton of items you've forgotten about because they're underleveled or serve no function anymore due to their low stat count. That's why there are possessed weapons. As long as you meet the level requirement when you obtain one, you can continue to feed it any items you have in your arsenal and level it up for a while. You can choose which stat buffs you want it to learn, therefore giving you an immensely customizable arsenal. You can even feed it other possessed weapons that you left to rot for a while if you really want to. This will allow you to amass an arsenal that can take on almost any situation, any enemy type, any boss fight, efficiently and effectively, creating and hanging on to weapons with different elemental effects and different stat buffs, different weapon types depending on the enemy you face. If you really need certain items, you can buy them from merchants all over the game world, and if you have extra guilt, you can see what Vulgrim has in store for you. Yeah, Vulgrim was kinda nerfed here, but he has his own isolated purpose in the game by providing you with random items of varying rarities, and a way to reassign your skill points. Ah yes, the modern trope of the skill tree. Some people see this as a lazy way for modern games to add an upgrade system. I disagree, and I feel that most games incorporate it in interesting ways. In Darksiders II, this is actually the only way to acquire Wrath abilities, and due to the way it's set up, you can optimize your build depending on how you like to play the game. There are two skill trees you can focus on individually, Harbinger and Necromancer. Harbinger is for close quarters encounters. You can use the teleport slash and the harvest ability to deal devastating ranged blows with your scythes. And Unstoppable lets you increase your strength and critical damage by a fuck ton to deal insane amounts of damage for a short period of time. Necromancer is for ranged attacks and defensive skills. If you ever need room to breathe, you can summon demons and crows to attack for you, and the Aegis Guard subtree will allow you to bounce damage off of you as long as you have the Wrath to keep it up. Each ability can be leveled up so that you can steal health and freeze enemies with the crows, you can gain Reaper energy from using Harvest, and you can allow your demons to deal fire damage and explode upon dying, delivering one final blow before they've served their purpose. It's a well-diversified system, with several different possibilities for skill loadouts, which definitely reflects on the damn near endless possibilities for your loadout in the loot system. Optimize your skills depending on where your strengths lie in battle, and if you ever need to reassign your points, you can do so for a measly 1000 guilt through Vulgrim. Overall, it's a fantastic system. I've seen plenty of games handle skill trees well, and Darksiders II is no exception. It complements the game's systems. I think a big thing that makes Darksiders 2's encounters stand out is how they nerfed dodging in comparison to the first game. A big factor in this could be that Dark Souls came out in between the two games, and it was a huge hit with the Western market. David Adams has discussed his love for Dark Souls before, and considering the boss-heavy design of Darksiders as a series, I'm not surprised he let the focus on timing and the combat of Dark Souls drip into Darksiders 2 a bit. Death has 3 dodges, and on the third consecutive dodge, there will be a delay before you can move again. The original game had an emphasis on dodging, but in Darksiders 2, you can't spam it like you did with War, and the game makes sure to test you as early on as the Icy Veil. While the Icy Golem here is a very slow-moving boss, War attacks in such a way that you need to learn how to predict. He has both sideways and forward slashes in patterns, as well as the Blade Geyser ability as a get-off-me move. He punishes you constantly, and it's a great introduction to the relentless nature of some of these bosses. They can get pretty damn intense, and the way they all tower over you make them extremely intimidating. I don't think there's a single boss in this game I dislike, and they all stand out to me due to their appearance, the methods in which they attack, and the way you can defeat them. I could do a full-on analysis of almost every boss in this game. They're that fun at times. The other category bosses in this game fall into are definitely more like Zelda, as they're way more focused on finding solutions during combat than anything. Take Karkanos for example. You have to dodge its charge, let him knock down one of its eggs from the ceiling, and throw the egg into it to knock it down. While not the most challenging fight in the world, it is an example of the game staying true to its roots. And even then, sometimes they go balls to the wall crazy with intense encounters against multiple enemies. Bosses in this game are unpredictable and never center on one core idea. I guess my only complaint is that the final boss isn't a great test of everything you've learned, but as it stands, he puts up a great fight on his own. Also, Rather than using empty vessels to store health and wrath replenishers, you can collect up to 5 potions for refilling both your health and wrath, which remind me heavily of the Estus flasks in Dark Souls. Although due to the fact that you can recover a decent amount of potions throughout the world, it'd probably be more akin to Bloodborne's blood vials. This system incorporates a level of strategy into encounters that wasn't present in the original game, due to how much health you can get for war. Yes, you can upgrade Death's health stat to hell and back if you really want, but that will barely soften the blows of tough enemy gauntlets and powerful bosses. It's a good system that keeps you on your toes. I'm not trying to say the whole game is like Dark Souls, because that's just wrong. It's just another example of how Darksiders is able to take inspiration from many different places and make it work. However, all of these elements together create a combat system that feels completely new to me, which is something that I can't say the original game did. The random loot, skill tree builds, and wrath abilities all make for something customizable and incredibly enjoyable. And it also makes every playthrough of this game feel somewhat different. I really like it. The other things the tutorial establishes are the voice acting and the writing. Two things that Darksiders seems to nail no matter what. Death himself is voiced by Michael Wincott, and he does a fantastic job. Death is a very sarcastic character that won't stand for anyone's garbage, and the way he interacts with the people in each world he visits is very assertive and intolerant. Death waits for no one. This is what makes the character interactions in Darksiders 2 just as memorable, if not even more so, in comparison to the original. Lilith, the sexually confusing creator of the Nephilim, has such a memorable interaction with Death despite it being her only major cutscene.
Why spare their souls, if not to one day undo your sin?
My sin? This corruption was born in Absalom. It rises from him like a black tide, and you, Mother, must help me stop it.
I also love the passive-aggressive relationship Death builds with Karn. It's hilarious.
Do you mind doing something for me?
Yes, I mind. Aren't I doing enough already?
Well, if it ain't much trouble, I left an old metal platter in there, with the image of 2 hammers scribed in the center.
Dish? You want me to bring you a dish?
Basically, Death doesn't want anything standing in his way as he tries to bring mankind back from extinction. Why? Well, Death can't exactly prove that war is innocent, so this journey is personal. If he brings mankind back, war's crimes will be expunged. Yes, Death is trying to bring mankind back to life. The Crowfather awaits him at the peak of the Icy Vale, still bitter about Death trapping the souls of the Nephilim in a lantern and giving it to him, tormenting him endlessly. It's here that the Crowfather tells Death that bringing mankind back is madness, and has him confront war in an epic showdown that I've already discussed. In a final act of desperation after Death deals a lethal blow to him, the Crowfather binds the souls of the Nephilim to Death for eternity. The Nephilim are largely a plot device, and they're only relevant again at the very end of the game. The rest of the game is driven on character interaction. A simple plot with complexity when looking at its characters and its world. That's what I love to see in video games. A narrative is nice, but world building is extremely important. And hey, that's what you get to indulge yourself in after the tutorial. Darksiders 2 is massive in comparison to the first game, boasting 5 unique worlds. The Forge Lands, where the Makers reside, the Kingdom of the Dead, which is self-explanatory, the Shadow's Edge, which is basically Hell, Lost Light, which is basically Heaven, and Earth. All of them have a distinct and fascinating look, once again thanks to the art direction of Joe Mad. Let's talk about the world design of Darksiders 2 as a whole though, because I was pretty damn harsh on the original game in retrospect. For the record, Darksiders 2's overworld and exploration are both substantially improved upon in comparison to the first game. My biggest complaint with the first game's world was the nature in which you find items was bland as heck. Acquire item, backtrack to place, use item in question, get the goods. That was how you found the majority of items. In Darksiders 2, finding items is actually fun. They challenge your use of items and navigation of areas well, they put small dungeon-esque areas in the world, and they even have side dungeons and optional bosses that can reward you with bonus weapons, some of which are actually possessed weapons with crazy stat buffs already on them. You know what? The game actually gives you so much freedom in both the Forge Lands and in the Kingdom of the Dead to just explore without a care in the world. As soon as you're plopped in, you can accomplish a great deal, even without major items. You can find so much by just going out of your way to explore. If the combat system was already customizable and freeform, the world structure goes hand in hand with that. And I mean, dude, you scale a fucking dragon to get to one of your objectives. How can you not fall in love with this stuff? All of this is fucking fantastic, and what the original game needed. Of course, now all we have in every chest in the overworld are randomly generated items, but since you need all of the items you can get, it doesn't seem like a problem to me. Certain chests actually have even rarer items in them, and they're placed in tricky areas. On top of that, the game constantly keeps a steady flow of content by giving you opportunities to complete side quests. At least, for the most part. A good chunk of Darksiders 2 encourages you to look beyond the scope of the game. Karn will be pleased if you can seek out his mementos while going through dungeons in the Forge Lands. While playing through the game, you should keep an eye out for Book of the Dead pages and stone bites. Completing a chapter of the Book of the Dead will grant you access to one of the 4 tombs in each respective world. These tombs contain a fuck ton of chests, containing rare and powerful items. Gathering a certain amount of stone bites can grant you one of various stat buffs. Upon defeating Thane in a skirmish, he'll direct you towards monsters hidden throughout the world. You don't have to kill them, but if you do, you'll be granted incredible weapons. Essentially, the game creates a very efficient system with its side quests. Most of them span the length of the game's campaign. There aren't many of them, and the collectible ones such as finding relics and pages for the Book of the Dead lend themselves well to this game's revised structure. Whether you like it or not, Darksiders II is not a game that encourages you to get 100%. It's a game that encourages you to seek out ways to increase your stats at all times, not something that encourages collecting like the original game did. And that's totally fine with me. If you remember, one of the main things that killed my drive to get 100% in Darksiders 1 ever again was the hunt for the artifacts. On their own, the artifacts were incredibly useful items that gave you a ton of souls. They were essential in order to purchase more combos and upgrades. But in order to get every life stone, one of the things you had to do was find every single one, something that I don't think they were optimized for. Their placements were sporadic and somewhat cryptic at times. Darksiders 2 has more collectibles to find that reward you in different ways, but because of the amount of them in the game, you're not expected to seek out all of them. It's like getting 100% in Skyrim or Fallout 4. This was something that Vigil changed for the better. It encourages the newfound freedom you have in this game thanks to its combat system and open-ended overworld. I think the only problems I had with exploring were comparatively minor. Some people tend to harp on the latter 3 worlds, Earth, Lost Light, and the Shadow's Edge. I understand that they are a missed opportunity. I would have loved to be able to fully explore Lost Light and the Shadow's Edge, but they're only home to a single dungeon each. I wouldn't go as far to call them padding because they felt relevant to the game. The dungeons that you go through are both fantastic. Both of them are actually some of my favorite dungeons in the game. I would agree on people calling Earth padding though. Remember that one part in the Ashlands where you had to use a bomb launcher? Imagine that, but an entire area with repeated bosses and barrages of enemies that only slow you down. I don't know why this area is in the game. It's cool seeing Death interact with Uriel during the aftermath of the apocalypse, but that's all I cared about. The other thing is that a couple of the side quests feel like wastes of time. With the quest you get from Nathaniel in Lost Light, you're basically a delivery boy, running around each world for a comparatively lame reward. And the Soul Arbiter's maze isn't exactly a maze per se. You can collect directions for the maze throughout the overworld, but it's just a glorified enemy gauntlet that has you looking at your inventory, seeing what portal you need to take, and then hey, you win. The good thing is you don't actually have to do either of these side quests. Sure, the Soul Arbiter's maze will always be a missed opportunity, but in terms of practicality, there are ways to increase Death's stats everywhere. These two things are completely optional, as is everything else that isn't connected to the game's overarching narrative. What you do with what's presented is entirely up to you. With that, let's get back to the goods, because they've kept the dungeons around, and they're still pretty awesome. There are a lot of dungeons in Darksiders 2, with more dungeons in the first world of the game than in all of Darksiders 1. The Forge Lands serve as an introduction to what dungeons will focus on. You still have ideas from the first game, like using sticky bombs to blow away corruption, but they also use rolling balls for figuring out how to get through areas, traversal puzzles, and combat with brand new enemies. While the dungeons aesthetically may blend in with each other at times, the Drenched Fort's atmosphere and themes should be noted. During this quest, you need to restore water and lava to Triforce, and the Drenched Fort has you acquiring the former. Throughout the course of this dungeon, you'll find yourself getting the water flowing in each area, and it's especially cool seeing the dungeon light up as you do so. A small detail that I noticed and absolutely adore is when you're swimming back to the center of the dungeon in the newly flooded canals. The water reflects the light from the sun onto the walls, giving them color. It reminds me of when I'm swimming in a pool, and that music complements the atmosphere so goddamn well. Where all of these design ideas culminate is the Foundry, and this time you have Karn with you in order to fight and solve puzzles. They introduce some of the most complex puzzles with the simple ideas, and they create a dungeon that caps off the Forge Lands in a great way. Actually, the way they conclude the Forge Lands is pretty fucking awesome. Throughout the final dungeon in the Forge Lands, Death and Karn are trying to restore the Guardian to its former glory by ridding it of corruption. However, it's too late, and Death instead has to take the thing down. This leads to a boss fight that a lot of people find especially memorable. The boss itself is rather simple, but scaling it and taking it down is the best part. The music adds to that feeling as well, it's incredible. The items introduced here are the Death Grip and Redemption, Strife's pistol. Redemption is about as useful as it was in the first game. It's satisfying to get chip damage in on the big enemies and completely wipe out the small ones. The Death Grip is interesting. I didn't talk much about the Abyssal Chain in my last video. It's essentially the hook shot, with the ability to bring yourself towards terrain and pull yourself towards enemies and vice versa. But at the same time, you can only latch on to designated floating things and climbable walls. The Death Grip may aesthetically fit into the game, but it's a neutered version of the Abyssal Chain. You can't swing around like you could previously, and honestly, it's just an extra step in traversal at this point. It's a good thing the first few dungeons aren't item-centric, otherwise there would be a problem. Despite Darksiders II having a rocky start with its items, the neat thing about the game is it doesn't dwell on certain ideas for too long. They give them enough time to be fleshed out and pique your interest, and then they move on to something new so that the cycle can repeat itself. After moving on to the Kingdom of the Dead, the game toys with entirely new ideas. The Gilded Arena is a combat-focused dungeon, with the introduction of the lantern mechanic, an idea that is somewhat reminiscent of the Black Throne's lasers. The difference here is the fact that you can take the mobile lanterns and use them on pressure plates. It's a neat idea. And look here, the lantern guy is from the Vigil Games logo. The Pharisier's Tomb plays with verticality, and this is where the traversal mechanics of this game really shine. You have to figure out how to get to the missing floor that the elevator will always skip due to Pharisier guarding it. What follows is a very interesting dungeon filled with exploration and a lot of puzzle solving, involving your own ability to assess your surroundings. And you know what? This is a theme throughout dungeons in Darksiders 2. Traversal is not mindless. I remember being genuinely perplexed when attempting to fetch the dungeon map in the Black Stone. It's great. Past this point, though, they introduced the ability to command the Lords of the Dead court you've conquered at will. And while it seems interesting with one of them by your side, it breaks the pace when you have to manage up to 3 of them, and waiting for them to go where you want them to go is so boring. This plagues the Judicator's Tomb and the Psychomeron, despite them being alright dungeons otherwise. Thankfully, they don't dwell on that item too long, as I previously mentioned, as it is immediately replaced by the Soul Splitter. While having the Lords of the Dead court fighting by your side has now been left in the dust, managing your 2 souls and even the statue where you spawn is fantastic. The Soul Splitter brings to light some of the best puzzles in the game, starting with the City of the Dead and later carried over into the Ivory Citadel, some of my favorite dungeons in the game. You have to think about where you're placing the clones and where you want to appear next. It's ingenious. I love figuring out how to get through the wall here by placing my spawn statue on the grate. Also, guess what? The Voidwalker is back. And they managed to fuse it with the Soul Splitter for some extremely intricate and well-designed puzzles. First of all, you have to figure out how to get through these 2 walls that have places for you to shoot portals onto. To do this, you need to use both forms in tandem with the Voidwalker. That's just the easy win though. Next, you have to place your statue atop a crate and use your clones to traverse your statue through various rotating walls that have portals on them. And then you have to do the same to get a laser through and dissipate the corruption. I love this game. So, in the last dungeon, you acquired the Angel Key from Archon. In the next and final dungeon, you have to acquire the Demon Key from none other than Samael. But how are you gonna do that? With the Phase Walker, of course. Lilith provides Death with an upgrade to his Voidwalker. Now he can travel through time with his portals. I don't even know how that fucking works canonically, but it's so cool in the context of this dungeon. I love figuring out how to traverse this dungeon based on what's in the past and what's in the present. From a creative standpoint, the organic design of this dungeon blew my mind, and the fight at the end with Samael is pretty damn fun. The ending, however, seemed bittersweet. After everything, Death did so much for so little reward, and I guess setting a goal for Death in a game that takes place during War's 100-year imprisonment would result in an ending that felt unfulfilling. Even then, the only reason he had to kill himself was because the souls of the Nephilim were bound to his chest. It sucks that this happened. Still, they probably could have given some insight into what making this sacrifice would actually mean for the restoration of humanity. Because if Darksiders 1 taught us anything, humanity is still fucked even after Death's sacrifice. No humans in sight. What's next? Basically, this ending leaves a lot of questions unanswered, a dead rider on her hands, ironically meaning the same fate as his namesake, and Lilith being killed by Satan. Darksiders 2's story is tragic, to say the least. I love the world building in it more than anything though, and I'm fully invested now. Apparently, Darksiders 3 will also be set during War's imprisonment, and will answer some questions fans have been asking. Is setting it parallel to Darksiders 2 the best option? Maybe Gunfire Games has a reason for this. Maybe Fury has some tales still left untold that can lead us one step closer to the resurrection of humanity. So yeah, Darksiders 2 is a really special game to me. But there's one thing I've kinda teased, yet still haven't talked about much until now, and that's the soundtrack. Do you remember the music from the original game? No? I don't blame you. It blended into the background and was largely forgettable. That's why Visual brought some new talent on board for Darksiders II. The soundtrack was created by none other than Jesper Kyd, known for his work on the Hitman, Borderlands, and Assassin's Creed series. His approach to the music in Darksiders 2 ended up being fucking phenomenal, and he created one of my favorite video game soundtracks of all time. This soundtrack has range, and can capture the essence and atmosphere of any area. On top of that, he's created some great combat music that fits each respective area and boss battle like a glove. The instruments he used create a welcoming yet otherworldly feeling that I loved experiencing. I'll never forget the first time I set foot in the Forge Lands thanks to his music. I found myself even more intrigued in the world around me thanks to his anthemic yet discordant tracks. Jesper is an amazing composer, and while I don't know if he'll be returning for Darksiders 3, a piece of it might feel empty without him. Yes, the music in Darksiders 2 left that much of an impact on me. And you know what? So did the rest of the game. Darksiders 2 felt like one of the biggest evolutions when it comes to a video game sequel. It keeps elements that worked, and does away with elements that didn't. Its combat has incredible amounts of customization and freedom to experiment, and it continues to be immensely enjoyable up until the very end and beyond. Its exploration is a significant step up from the first game, with actual challenges and puzzles in the overworld, side dungeons, optional bosses, and so much more. The dungeons are mostly intelligent and fun, the character interactions and voice acting are both amazing, with some of the best visuals and music I've experienced in a video game to date. The combination of all of these elements created one of my favorite games of all time, something that I can replay over and over without any regret. While I did recommend Darksiders 1 with some caution because of the problems I had with it, I can't recommend Darksiders 2 enough. If anything of what you've seen interests you, please check this game out. I know I've spoiled it to hell and back, but playing this game is so much more fun than watching it. I promise you. And hey, if you want more, Darksiders 2 actually has additional campaigns that expand upon the mechanics established in the game. While they used to be optional DLC packs, they're included in the Definitive Edition. Oh, come on guys, really? However, the modest sales and reception of Darksiders 2 wouldn't be enough to save the sinking ship that was THQ. Despite their efforts, the company would eventually file for bankruptcy during the holiday season of 2012 and would be liquidated the next month. Yeesh. Talk about getting coal in your stocking. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned that Darksiders 2 was able to complete development. Well, as it turns out, when it came time to acquiring properties and studios, publishers are more willing to purchase a studio working on a game that's over halfway into development. That's how they maximize profit. They only have to fund some of the development and the dough will follow. That's why when Vigil had only just started thinking about a new game when they were in need of funding, no one was willing to purchase them. Vigil couldn't keep themselves afloat and eventually shut down in January 2013, sinking along with THQ. But this would not be the end of them. Joe Madureira would go on to work at Airship Syndicate and create Battle Chasers Night War. David Adams would go on to found Gunfire Games, now an independent and self-sufficient developer, unlike Vigil, which was owned by THQ. Nordic Games, now THQ Nordic, would acquire the Darksiders intellectual property, among others like Metro and Saints Row. After making some money on remasters and new games, THQ Nordic was able to fund a third game and get Gunfire on board to develop it. Once again, they're trying something new in order to appease both Darksiders 1 and Darksiders 2 fans. It seems like the developers of the series are willing to create something for everyone. Here's hoping it delivers when the game drops on November 27th. I'll see you then with the final video in my Darksiders retrospective. I've been Liam Triforce, and I'd like to thank you for watching.